First, we have Dr. Anne Marie Slaughter. She's the Chief Executive Officer of New America. And then we also have Jean Accius, Senior Vice President, Global Thought Leadership at AARP. So Jean and Anne Marie, would love to bring you into the conversation and hear your perspectives.
Right.
Well, how are you, Anne Marie?
It's a pleasure to be here. And I will just say that this is an example of virtual being better, because I've never been able to come to the Social Innovation Summit. I've always wanted to do so. And finally, I can, because we're everywhere, but also now here together at the summit.
Well, I'm glad to be having this conversation with you. And I also want to just give my heartfelt thanks to the Social Innovation Summit. At AARP, social innovation and impact is in our DNA. And it's been in our DNA for more than 60 years. And as we been hearing throughout today's session, the impact that COVID-19 is having, the situation that we're seeing across the country around equity, and the need to find both solutions. There's no one I could ever think about that I would be wanting to have a conversation with than you today. So thank you so much for your time and just for your leadership on so many issues.
You're welcome. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, would you please tell us a little bit about New America and some of the work that you are leading currently, Anne Marie?
So New America is a think tank, but it's really a think and action tank. And we work on a range of issues that are all connected to renewing the promise of America by holding the country to its highest ideals. And right this moment, it is very evident that we are not living up to those ideals. We're founded on the idea that all men are created equal. That was white men of property. It's gradually expanded, but we've seen in the past few days, but really ever since the beginning of COVID, the tremendous inequalities in our society and the threats to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So we work on everything from technology policy to political reform to care and the future of work, the subject that we're talking about now. But we really think about the big changes we have to make to become the country that Langston Hughes said that we should be, but have never been.
Absolutely. Well, let's get right to it with regards to the future of work and COVID-19. And what we've seen is that in many cases, COVID-19 has accelerated the future of work. And even within the context of the future of work, these glaring inequalities. Can you talk a little bit about what we're seeing, particularly with regards to the caring workforce? And how do we start to address some of these inequalities in a more systematic and intentional way?
Absolutely. And really, in many ways, the COVID crisis is like a time machine to the future, where things that we've been predicting, many of us who work on the future of work have been saying, you know, retail is going away. It's many things that can be automated will be automated. And suddenly you are seeing this happening much, much faster. So you're seeing people being laid off, but a lot of those jobs will not be there because they're accelerating trends that were already happening. And on the other side, we're seeing a need for many more care jobs. I mean, the first thing we're seeing is that care workers are essential workers. And of course, medicine is the most obvious way, and not just doctors and nurses, but technicians and everyone involved in caring for people in the medical establishment. But then, of course, childcare. And without childcare, frontline workers can't go to work. Without childcare, you end up having to do homeschooling while you're trying to do other jobs, and people who can't work online then really have no ability to work. And then, of course, elder care, and AARP works a great deal on elder care. And look what we're asking of elder care workers in nursing homes and assisted living communities. Many of those people are not even being paid the living wage, and yet we're asking them to be taking care of some of the most vulnerable people in our society. So as I look at all this, I see a need to recognize and value care, but also to change the prestige and the training that we invest in care jobs.
Well, let me ask you this question. This is extremely fascinating, and you're hitting this right on target. What we've seen with COVID-19, and particularly with respects to the disproportionate impact it's having on nursing home residents across this country, with over 30,000 deaths, with, to your point, this essential workforce who is pretty much having to make some very tough decisions when they leave their home and risking the exposure to COVID-19. How can employers start to think about some of these issues from a multi-generational standpoint, from a generational perspective? What are some of the solutions that really help to start to meet these needs and solve this big issue?
Well, I think it's employers, and it's also got to be the government. And frankly, it has to be all of us, because when we say we don't value care, we don't just mean that we don't pay it enough. We mean that it doesn't get any social prestige. If you say, I'm home caring for a child or a parent, an elderly parent, or simply an ailing spouse or a disabled person in your family, that doesn't get the kind of social rewards, much less often the monetary rewards. But all of us have to start thinking of care work as essential work, which we are saying now, but also the kind of work that if we invest in, we can actually create new jobs. And if we invest, and if we start to think about, let's take elder care workers. I mean, I'm certainly old enough to be a member of AARP, and when I think of wanting my best day as I get older, and that's really the best way to think about it. It's what Atul Gawande talks about in Being Mortal. I want people who are trained, who really understand my brain and my neuroscience and can help me be as autonomous as I can be. Just as people who are caring for children need to understand their brains and need to understand how to let them develop and grow and have as much autonomy as they can have to grow. So we have to rethink the jobs. We provide more training. That's an investment, and it's an investment that employers will need government help to make. But for the government and for all of us as taxpayers, we can get ourselves to a new equilibrium if we do that. We can create jobs that, frankly, machines can help with. I mean, if you're in elder care or even child care, there are things that robots can help you do. But there's a lot that still absolutely needs humanity. But we need those new jobs, and we can invest in making them really good jobs.
And I love exactly what you're saying, Anne Marie. At AARP, we've launched a major initiative called Living, Learning, Earning Longer. It's a partnership with the World Economic Forum and OECD. And the concept there is really, how can we foster a more age-diverse workforce? How can we ensure that with people, in many cases, living longer and either needing or wanting to work, what are those strategies? What are those policies? What are those practices in which we can really create an environment that allow workers to really succeed at the highest levels of their professions? And I love what you're saying in terms of investing, because one of the things we've heard from many companies who's part of this learning collaborative is that they are looking for innovative ways and strategies to invest in their workforce. And the whole notion that, people are going to school and then they just go to work is changing, that people are living nonlinear lives, and that this concept of continuing to lifelong learning and skill building is going to be critically important. So I just want to say thank you for that. I don't know if there's more that you would like to add around the investing piece and what does that look like, but I think you're absolutely right that there needs to be greater investment in our workforce.
Absolutely. And when we've just been hearing a lot about the gig economy, and so often we do think about the gig economy as somebody who's driving for Lyft or somebody who does TaskRabbit, or we tend to think about it as young people on the West Coast. That's not true. More and more, families will come together and many different members of the family will be contributing to the income stream. And that means older people who may have left their jobs but still work on a project basis, and they're still contributing to family welfare in various ways. It may mean some of us who say, well, okay, we don't want to do a full-time job, but we still really want to be active in different ways, and we want to take up new things. And indeed, when I advise younger people, I say, you need to think about your career like, different strings to your bow, and that you'll be doing lifelong learning and earning. But the other piece of that, and New America does a lot of this work both on family economic security, but also what we call the Better Life Lab. The other piece of that is expanding the way we think about what care is. So if you look at the jobs that are expanding, there are things like coaching, which I call care for men, right? To be a life coach, an executive coach, a health coach. There are a ton of different coaching jobs. Their jobs as mentors, their jobs as guides and navigators and advisors. Many of those are for older people who need tech help or need help navigating complex systems. So another big part of the care economy is looking at everything from being a minister, a coach, a therapist, an educator, a mentor, all as part of care jobs.
That's exactly right. I would just add that what I love about this is the skill sets that each of these different functions provide workers, and how that benefits workers across generations, where you talk about not just mentoring, but the reverse mentoring, where you talk about one of the things that I've heard from a lot of companies who are looking at an age diverse workforce. They're saying, we have to look at our policies and ensure that we're looking at this from a life stage perspective. So you talk about caregiving, for example, roughly about 60% of workers are having some form of caregiving responsibilities. So it's impacting them in some way. So when companies think about workplace policies, they really should kind of think about it from a life stage perspective. What do I mean by that? Well, there's 53 million Americans who are family caregivers. Well, 25% of them are millennials. So as you kind of start to think about your workplace policies, ensuring that they are across the life stage is critically important. But Anne-Marie, I have a question for you, because I'm just so, as you know, we had a great conversation and respect just your leadership in so many ways. What would America look like in the next 30 years?
Oh, well, in a period of very dark days, I do see at least the potential for a far, far better America. And it would be an America in which we recognize the traditional individualist striving, right? That's part of our DNA. We're the individuals who come here and make it in the American dream. And, I'm a woman who spent much of my life fighting to be defined as a lawyer and a professor and a CEO, and not only as a mother and a daughter and a sister and a wife. But I want an America that sees both, that says, yes, we are those individual competitive people, but we're also deeply caring, connected beings. And the America we love was built with barn raisings and quilting bees and, frankly, enslaved labor, people who had to hang together to fight for one another. Many of our poorer communities have always been far more interdependent and family-centered. And that's America, too, that we're a country where competition and care can go hand in hand, and we can value both, and we can understand that both are indispensable to our health and well-being and to our economy.
That is absolutely profound. I think that some of the points that you raised on our conversation today, thinking about the different skill sets that people bring, thinking about how do we expand our traditional mindset and be more open-minded to other professions and other skill sets to really help to address this care gap that's frankly only going to grow unless we start to do these meaningful investments and to value our essential workers and not value them in a period of pandemic or a crisis, but also value them before there's a storm and to really recognize and acknowledge them. So before we leave today, I want to leave on a point of hope. And you talked about the new America and what America might look like in the next 30 years. What do you think America might look like in the next 5 to 10?
Well, I like to think about 2026, which will be our 150th birthday and 250th birthday. And I think that America is on the cusp between an America that was always majority white and certainly dominated by white Americans. But our next 250 years will be an America that truly reflects the world, where there will not be one majority. And I want to think of an America, particularly right now, in which we take pride in that diversity as our greatest strength as a country, not a source of division and discrimination, but a source of wealth and health and well-being and pride.
Well, Anne-Marie, thank you so much for your wisdom, your leadership, your bold vision. I cannot thank you enough for all that you are doing. And thank you so much to the Social Innovation Summit team.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Thank you, Jean. Wonderful to have you join us. Excellent work, and we look forward to partnering with you in the future more and more.